As the war rages on, farming becomes a deadly profession in Ukraine as farmers struggle to keep their country fed. In the middle of a Russian invasion, Ukraine's agriculture is suffering terribly as nations from neighboring countries continue to watch. For today's video, we'll be looking at the current situation on the ground and what the people have been doing in the last-ditch effort to save their farms. Firstly, what is the current situation of the farming industry in Ukraine? The irrigation water has been switched off, the farming fields have been laced with mines, and an export powerhouse has been reduced to subsistence farming. Farmers in Ukraine are experiencing this reality as they struggle for their freedom against a Russian invasion. As of late, one of ABC News' informant shares about the current events in Ukraine in a recent interview. Louis Churnside manages a mixed farming operation in Kerrang, Victoria, but has also farmed in Ukraine, where he says the devastation of agriculture is heartbreaking. He was interviewed by ABC News during the start of the invasion when he was feeling helpless as his friends fled or dug up guns to protect their homes. The news channel followed up with Louis and his pals 3 months later to see how the Ukrainian farmers were doing. In the interview, he relates how farmers are doing their best to provide water since it's compromised along with the fields. According to Churnside, a young woman named Alice and her 2 children are attempting to flee Ukraine. It took her a few days, but she eventually arrived in Austria. The mother and children escaped, but her father remained in Mariupol and was executed by Russians. He also describes the situation as dire, particularly in agriculture, which has little control over production this year. The farms are attempting to develop a few hectares to feed people in nearby camps, where they've succeeded with most crops. However, the Russians control all irrigation and cut off the farmers' access to water. So now the farmers are attempting to dig wells so that they can have water for the local villages. Aside from the water being cut off, he also stated that the fields aren't laced with mines and ammunitions, which make it hard for farmers to do their job. Out there in the fields, there are mines, ammunition, there are destroyed military equipment and farming equipment, he told the news station. It's a really tough situation, and those farms in that area aren't getting any money, and they can't regain the income that they've lost. He further stated that it is a fight for survival in the area, claiming that necessities like water and money are scarce. Up next, while farming is hard, some still try to do their best to yield produce despite the terrible situation. One product that's considered a big export in Ukraine is potatoes, and right now, these root crops are literally free since people no longer have money to buy them, according to Churnside. By now, everyone has pretty much heard of the potato shortage used in making French fries, so Ukraine's inability to sell this product will also have a huge blow to the world's economy. With no finance, Ukraine is unable to export grains out of the country as well, where it takes at least 5 days to get trucks to cross the Romanian border, which is a friendly border to the nation. As for the tomato industry, Churnside said that there are 800,000 tons of tomatoes comprised of 4 large factories, with 2 of these factories being in occupied territory, and the other 2 factories are smack bang where the Russians are trying to push the Ukrainians out of Mykolaiv and trying to move on past Odessa. Seeing how there are a lot of obstacles in farming, it has now become a deadly profession. It's difficult to comprehend that in this world, a simple act of farming to feed yourself and your neighbors is considered a deadly profession, with all the fields laced with mines and ammunition, aside from farming equipment being destroyed. The farmers come in and they try to do as much as they could. According to Churnside, they bring in diesel from the borders, including the Polish borders, but they're worried about when harvests start. And as one farmer knows, they're not sure where they're going to store the products. Other things they're worried about are getting plant protection equipment, as well as fertilizer. Despite being difficult, the farmers are doing what they can to provide for the nation by planting with what they have right now. Now is Ukraine's peak growing season, and it's a very short grain season, so they're sowing crops and vegetables around the end of April, finishing around the 6th of May and harvesting in August. So the planting window has passed, and what they have now is what they have for now, and they're trying to make the best of it by harvesting. While farmers are busy focusing on their jobs in the fields, many other Ukrainian citizens continue the country and shift from one place to another. When asked by ABC if he has an idea of where his other colleagues are in Ukraine, Churnside related how he has a friend who is trying to get out and make it to Odessa by camping out. It's dangerous to go past the Russians, but at least they're not being bombarded where they are now, although in Odessa you might be. This acquaintance, who has another friend in Odessa who is now living in France, called him and advised her not to travel to Odessa. Another colleague he knew was a man who used to farm chickens in Russia and now lives in Ukraine. Ukraine. He acknowledges that he has no idea where he is, but the last he heard, he was renovating houses. They are all putting in as much effort as they can. To wrap up the report, ABC asked Chirnside what his friends may want the world to know about the situation in the country. To this, he answered with the following: "There's nothing specific, except again, it's what is happening. What they're trying to get across here is that this isn't only just affecting Ukraine, it will affect the rest of the world, and they're hoping that's going to be a motivation to try and bring it to an end as quickly as possible. But no one's there holding up any hope other than they've got to build themselves, and they're very grateful for the support." He further added, "It's not just moral support, it's also grain produces that farmers are setting up harvest, which will be sold and used to help Ukraine. We're all trying to think of something about how we could do it, how we could help make a difference, and I think the very significant way to help them out." So is there a way to help farmers in Australia? Grain producers in Australia have established a delivery number that farmers can use when delivering this season's harvest, which will subsequently be sold and the proceeds donated to humanitarian help, with an emphasis on Ukrainian farmers. The NGR number for JPI is 15004442, and there are several other places you may donate to if you want to help the people of Ukraine financially or otherwise. So what other produce is Ukraine known for? Ukraine is a major producer of wheat, corn, and sunflower oil, and the war has wreaked havoc on the breadbasket of Europe, with Ukraine and Russia accounting for more than a quarter of global wheat exports. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Agriculture, 30% of the country's agriculture is now occupied or hazardous. How did the Russians sabotage the country's farming industry? Not only those on the front lines have been affected in the country, farmers are trying to get fertilizer to produce fresh harvests as gas prices rise, and anything they produce will be even more difficult to sell. Ukrainian grains have been trapped in temporary silos across the country, especially in port cities like Odessa, along their primary export route, the Black Sea. The Russians have stopped ships from leaving and, according to the Ukrainians, have planted naval mines for those who try to sneak through. Sergei Lyshenko, a senior advisor to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's chief of staff, said in a statement that the country will have much less harvest this year, but stressed that it's important to have a harvest, at least to cover internal needs. According to Lyshenko, the administration is attempting to assist with global requirements. They've attempted to build new train export lines to the west and minor ports along the Danube River to the south. However, he claims it is insufficient. There is still a bottleneck for proper export of Ukrainian food, he says. It's impossible without making the Odessa region work properly. Experts are pointing out that the war between the two countries will affect the world sooner rather than later. The war's disruptions have resulted in rising costs and fears of food shortages in poorer countries. Elena Naroba, a trade analyst based in Kiev, warns that the worldwide consequences would be severe, as households in developing countries that rely on Ukrainian wheat will struggle to buy more expensive wheat. She cites countries such as Indonesia, which imports 28% of its wheat from Ukraine, and Bangladesh, which imports 21%. Egypt receives nearly all of its wheat from Ukraine and Russia. For now, these are the current news items regarding the farming industry in Ukraine and how it will affect the rest of the world. Thanks for watching today's video, and don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel with the notification bell on for more videos like these.